Hi, I'm E.D. Lewis, and welcome back to my channel, E.D. Lewis Reviews, for another Dracula review. Before we get started, please hit that like and that subscribe button, and that little bell so you'll get all the notifications for all my new videos. So, last time we did Dracula's Guest, the time before that we did the novel Dracula, now it's time to do something a little different, so we're going to do a film review for the earliest film adaptation, well, earliest surviving, and we'll get to that in a moment. Adaptation of Dracula, Nosferatu. I forgot my little sentence there. By F.W. Murnau. So, alright. So this, like I said, is the earliest surviving adaptation of Dracula. It was also an unauthorized adaptation of Dracula. And it is famous for, well, it's famous for a number of things, but one of the things it's famous for is that Bram Stoker's widow, Florence Stoker, she actually had a court order put out there to have it destroyed. All the copies that had been, made and distributed across Europe destroyed. Luckily, though, many of these many of the copies were destroyed, but luckily there were some that were not, and so there are a few that were made duplicates of, and we have the film today. So, and I have my notes right in front of me. But like I said, this is not the first Dracula film. There was one that came out the year before in 1921. By the way, this is from 1922, and it is a German expressionist film. The 1921 film is called Dracula's Death. It was a Hungarian-Austrian film, and it didn't really have much to do with Dracula as far as I know. It's about a man who's in an insane asylum, believes he's Dracula, and I think he's trying to kill this girl or something like that. I don't know a whole lot about the film, but, that's kind of the gist of it from what I understand. As far as we know, the film is lost. There's at least one film critic that claims there is still a surviving copy in some archives in I think in Austria, Hungary, or something like that. But most film critics consider, and film historians consider it to be, lost, as many of the films by the director of that film are lost. But getting back to 1922's Nosferatu. So, it is an adaptation of the novel. We do get the general premise of, a man going to Transylvania to sell some property to the vampire, who in this case is not Count Dracula. His name is Count Orlok, though there are some copies out there that do refer to him as Count Dracula. In the original film and stuff, he is referred to as Orlok. They had changed a bunch of the names. It's kind of a misnomer, though, that they say that they changed the names to avoid the copyright thing, but yet in the opening credits, and this is on many versions, because I've looked at several at the credits and stuff, for all the ones I've checked, they all say based on the novel by Dracula. Even Kino's reproduction, I don't know if they reproduced the credits or if those were existing, I don't know, but they even say based on the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. So I think it's kind of a misnomer, and I think I've heard other people say the same thing too. Well, at least I've heard one other person. So, the real estate agent goes to Transylvania, to the Count's castle, and, is going to sell him some real estate in the town he lives in, which is not England in this case. I'm not sure if it's Wisborg or Weisborg. I'm going to go Weisborg for this, because I'm not really sure of the pronunciation. If anybody knows, please let me know. As I've said many times before, I hate mispronouncing words and names, so. But anyway, and he's, held captive in the castle. The vampire prepares to leave, and he goes to the town and, wreaks havoc, just like in, in the novel Dracula. There is some other there are, of course, some differences in the plot. There's this whole thing about plague and everything, which I'll talk about a little bit later, coming up in the video, really. Some of the other differences in the film are that, you know, the names, of course, are changed. Not just Orlok, you know, Count Dracula becoming Orlok, but also there's the character of Renfield and Mr. Hawkins are conjoined into one character who they call Knock. And there is Jonathan Harker's character is now Hutter. His wife is Ellen instead of Mina. They're already married. And, I mean, plot details, the location, the time period is another thing that's changed too. It's not the late 1800s, like 1880s and 1890s. It is 1838, I do believe. There was one edition I looked at that said 1848, and I'm like, it's like, someone changed that, so I don't know who, but, you know. But anyway, so that's kind of the gist of the film. And of course, there are some differences, and we learn about vampire. You know, the character Hutter learns about vampires from a book about vampires and superstitions in the area. Excuse me. So now we're going to go to the meaning of the word Nosferatu. It is said, I think even in you know, Dracula, at least some of the adaptations, they refer to Nosferatu, and that it's a Eastern European word. It is not. As far as I can tell, and from my research, there's no such word. That this word was just kind of popularized possibly by this movie. I don't know where the popularization of this word came from. Well, no, it wouldn't be from this movie. I'm sorry. I'm catching myself up there. I don't know where it came from, where it was popularized, but it would have been before this film. So sorry, that was a flaw on my part. I'm so sorry for that. As far as I can tell, it is a possible corruption of a Greek word which refers to plague bringer or bringer of the plague, and this does play a part in this film. Part of the huge influence on this film probably was the Spanish influenza pandemic. Sound familiar? That ended actually 100 years ago last year in 1920, 2 years before this film was made. And, of course, when Orlok comes, there's a bunch of rats on the ship, and there's fear of plague, and everybody is talking about plague, and these symptoms are vampire-induced, but there's many people who die and stuff, and so there's that going on. So we have this whole plague thing. We also get a little bit of the same idea from Dracula, this fear of the outsider and kind of this nationalism, you know, so fear of the immigrant in a way. So we do get that in there too. There are some other elements that I don't really want to talk about because of the subject matter. It's terrible. Kind of like the fear of the immigrant thing is rather terrible. Well, not rather, it is. And that's, there's also a bit of this talking about Orlok's appearance. I mean, he's considered very rat-like and kind of bat and spidery-like too. But, which connects, of course, to the rats and the plague-bringing rats. But it's the whole, there's the anti-Semitism in the film. From what far as we can understand, it was not intentional. It was that some people picked up on it at the time, and people still pick up on it today, that Orlok kind of represents, you know, Jewish culture and stuff, and this was not too long before the Nazi, not too off long before the Nazi Party started, you know, gaining power and took over, you know, Germany and stuff. That's kind of the unfortunate bit that I really didn't want to talk about, but I feel it maybe a little bit needs to have a little bit of some context with the analysis of the film. That's the you know, the second unfortunate thing about this film. But as far as we can tell, it was rather unintentional. Murnau and all those involved did not mean for that to happen, but, you know, sometimes symbolism leaks in, whether if we mean it to or not. It's all due to interpretation. So, we do not support anti-Semitism or hate toward anybody on this channel. I'm just letting you know that right now. So, moving on. Also, there's the occultism in this film. Ooh, there's one other point I want to bring up, but I'm going to come back to it. that we see. And this film was produced by Prana Films, and which was to focus on more spiritual films and stuff. Unfortunately, this was the only film that was made by them due to Florence Stoker's court order, and the film not doing overly well. Just like the novel Dracula, when it first came out, it didn't do overly well. Of course, this film has become a legend now, and it's a horror classic. It's kind of an almost considered ancient horror classic because it's so old, and it's 99 years old this year. But we also see, we see this occultism, which was rising up in Europe at the time after World War I. After, so many lives being lost, so many young men and soldiers dying, that, this need kind of to step away from mainstream religion and more into, communication with the spirit world. So we see, that was going on at the time, and Prana Films wanted to, make more spiritual films, more occultist, and this was considered, the first occultist film. But we see other instances of this. Of course, Orlok, is this kind of demon-like creature that attacks the innocent. And we have, Nock's correspondence with Orlok, which is covered all these occult symbols and stuff, which kind of really makes me wonder, what was Nock into exactly? I have no idea, because we see those letters twice. We see him reading one, and then we see Orlok reading another later on in the film. It really makes me wonder, how did he get into contact with Orlok? Was it just because Orlok had contacted him, or had he been involved in some sort of practice that, brought, Orlok onto his radar, or the other way around? I don't know. But we also have the Paracelsian doctor, who's the Van Helsing-like character, who doesn't really do much for the plot, though. Not the same as in the original novel. And I'm going to probably butcher his name, Bulwer. I'm not sure that's how to pronounce his name. But he's referred to as Paracelsian doctor. And he's very interested in carnivorous plants and, stuff like that. And the Paracelsian title there references back to alchemy with Paracelsus. So, but that's a little bit on the occultism. There's one more little point I want to bring up here, and that is feminism. That this film does have a bit of strong feminism, and there's going to be a little bit of spoiler here. The character of Ellen, Hutter's wife, ultimately, she is given the key to stopping this whole thing, to ending it. From the beginning, she has kind of uneasy feelings about her husband leaving, and she has dreams and stuff about her husband, harm coming upon him from, his travel, as well as she, discovers, what can be done to stop it, and she goes about that, and that's all I want to say on that matter. She's given very much the power here to stop everything. She's pretty much driving to be the hero. Not Hutter, not any of the men, she is. So it makes her vitally important. And really, there's not that many female characters. There's only a handful. Only two that are somewhat given names. And she's the one with an actual name, Ellen, because I think the other character that's referred to, I don't think she's really given much of a name. She's referred to as Harding's wife, who I kind of see as kind of a Homewood character, and he's a friend of Hutter's, and his wife, in some editions they refer to her as Lucy. So, but anyway, that's pretty much it about the film. I actually just got this edition recently. I wanted a better edition than some of the public domain ones, and the restoration of this from Kino is absolutely gorgeous. It has the color tinting. It looks pretty flawless in many frames. Not all the frames, though. Not as well as Caligari, which I know you can't see where I'm pointing. I'm pointing across the room where I have a bunch of my horror films, and I have Kino's edition of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari I got last year, which just turned 100 last year, by the way. And the restoration on it is absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. So But this also includes a documentary about F.W. Murnau and the making of the film. There's a lot more information on it, including on-location shooting, where you get to see the, a lot of the places they actually filmed, and the house where Orlok takes up residency in the town. And you also get some excerpts from Murnau's films. I didn't watch that, though. So, but anyway, that is Nosferatu, directed by F.W. Murnau, released in 1922. And do check it out if you have not already. I would be surprised if you've never heard of it, because, I mean, it's one of the most famous vampire films, and it was even a film that inspired the Bela Lugosi film in some ways. Of course, the Bela Lugosi film is based off of the play and the book, but the directors, of course, the filmmakers went in and looked at Nosferatu and used it for some inspiration, especially with the German expressionism that is in this film. It's also used in a lot of Universal films from the early 1930s. So, but like I said, that's Nosferatu. Do check it out. Please leave comments down below, and I will see you next time on the next part of my Dracula reviews. So until next time, bye-bye.